Well, hello there, Simone here with Bulletproof Business Growth, as always, with some ideas and insights what to pay attention to when you're growing and scaling your business. And I'm really excited today. We have a special guest with us on the show. Welcome, welcome, Katherine Hartvickson. We're so happy to have you.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, and I mean, I have I'm going to give you guys the official intro to Katherine. I'll say Katherine Hartvickson, founder and CEO of Quantum Ascendance, offers an incredibly valuable service to small business owners and entrepreneurs by providing personalized attention and serving as a trusted HR business partner. They are well equipped to help businesses strengthen their leadership and HR strategies. This tailored approach ensures that businesses not only comply with legal and regulatory requirements, but also excel in cost-effective hiring, very important, and retaining top talent, even more important. Catherine's focus on leadership coaching and development is particularly important for driving business success and fostering a positive workplace culture. And I'll say all that is true because Katherine and I have been friends for a very long time, and Katherine has worked with us in our offer, in our coaching and training company for almost as long, but it's been a few years now, Catherine, and
Mm.
you've always been a hugely valued part of our company. Catherine has helped so many of our clients do exactly what her interest said, and I mean, we always love having her. And it's like the other day, I was like, Catherine, we haven't had you on the podcast. It's time that we talk about HR. And this all came about after you just wrote that article why HR has a bad rep and how to change it and what to do about it. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And I mean, Catherine has come in so often into our mastermind and done some presentations about the little diddly squat that we don't think about as business owners, like how to fill out a W-2 and have it be correct, and how many mistakes you can make on that one page, and how much it can actually cost a business owner when it's done not correct. So we're going to talk about all this stuff today. So thanks again for being here, Catherine. Let's get this started. So let's talk
Let's do
about,
it.
why does HR have a bad rep?
Yeah, well, and typically, again, I come from large global organizations before I started my own business. And when someone gets called into HR, it's usually like, what did I do wrong?
Yeah.
It's usually not because you're getting a promotion or a pay raise. It's something bad has happened and an investigation is going to start. So automatically, it's like going to the principal's office when you were a kid. Nobody wants to go to the principal's office. So
No.
nobody wants to go to HR.
Yeah, you're getting
So
fired is probably most people's first thought or
Ex
something like that, right?
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they're already on the defense. But oftentimes, HR people, if they're not professionally trained and experienced, oftentimes they're considered to just be like the hatchet lady. They used to be called that, the hatchet lady. They would smile jokingly, but somewhere in there, they thought there might be some truth to it because sometimes you do have to do that. But when they come to your office, if they know you and they know that you're fair, you're not just going to take whoever the supervisor side or the manager side or whatever, but you're actually going to ask the questions and find out what really happened. Then they can kind of calm down and you can get to the real issue and you can help make the best decision for the company. What they don't want is that you just automatically assume they're wrong, company is right, and they're going to bear the brunt of that.
Yeah.
And that's often been what HR people would do. Somebody said, "Hey, fire that person." And they're like, "Okay, when do you want me to do it?" "Well, today, right now." "Okay, let me process the paperwork and I'll call them in and I'll fire them." Well,
Mm.
that's not the way to run a business because as you know, it's so expensive to recruit and then find great people and then be able to keep people. And you spend a lot of time and money in training those people.
Yeah.
And if they have to walk out the door, get moved out the door, then someone's going to have to pick up the slack until you get somebody else on board and trained as well.
Well,
So I think it's,
just
oh,
just
go
the
ahead.
cost of a failed hire, right? That's like,
Yes.
I mean, I read this somewhere, and correct me if I'm wrong, but something like the cost of a, like at a leadership level, at least the cost of
Mhm.
a
Oh,
missed hire is something like three times the annual salary or something crazy like that. When we talk about, you
that's
know, time like onboarding, a lot of times recruiting fees that were paid, uh, bonuses and what's it called, hiring bonuses and all that kind of stuff. But then
Yeah.
the time for training,
And then you got the
then
mistakes.
the
Yeah.
mistakes when they leave, all that stuff. So I think it was
They're
just
going
kind
to make
of,
mistakes. They're new.
yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, we definitely want to make sure that,
Yeah. It's a very, very expensive.
yeah. So one of the things that you just said was the perception of loyalty to the management, right? So that
Mm,
people automatically assume that
correct.
HR is on the side of management and it's actually not
Right.
for them.
Right. Yeah. It's not the place for them to come, and it should be. It should be. I always, said we're like Switzerland. Okay. So yes, are we here to support management? Of course we are. I mean, it's a business, and we're part of that, an integral part of that business. But we also have to be fair to the employees. So they should be able to come and tell us things as well. And oftentimes, especially if we have developed that relationship and they see us in a lunchroom and they see us out there on the, production floor or whatever, and they can just say, "Hey, do you have a second?" Then they can talk to you and they learn, you actually develop a relationship, and they will tell you things that other management isn't going to know about because they're
Mm,
not going to say it to maybe to their boss. And then you can help solve that problem before it becomes a big problem
yeah. So that's actually not just a good deal for the employee, but a
for the
huge deal
company.
for the company, for the business owner, because it actually means you as a business owner aren't in the middle of everything. There's somebody else who's kind of like the buffer. And I like what you're saying in terms of if you do it correctly, you are Switzerland.
Mhm.
So that can also
Yeah,
really, really help resolve issues for sure. Yeah.
right. It's also a place for supervisors to come. And I always said, inside my office, you can say anything you want. You could call them every name in the book if you want, but when you leave my office, you cannot speak like that out there because we're going to get a lawsuit, we're going to get discrimination charges, hostile work environment, and we're not going to go there.
Yeah.
But here's a safe place to vent and get advice on how to handle a certain situation.
Yeah. I mean, what
That's
would
really
you
important.
say, toxic behavior is something that I think it's talked about a lot, like, in general in the last few years, just mental health, toxic behavior, all that kind of stuff. It's been on a lot of people's mind, and a lot of business owners have been experiencing that. How can HR help with addressing that?
First of all, step up and address it because, especially small business owners, they just want to look the other way and hope it'll just go away on its own. It'll all calm
Right.
down. One of my clients is a doctor, and she said, "Look, they taught me how to like heal people and treat people. They didn't teach me how to run an office, and these people are driving me crazy. So I try to pretend it's not happening until it's so big, but by then I've got everybody upset with me because I didn't address it up front.
Yeah.
So everybody's upset. So that's why she hired me as HR so that I can handle all that stuff for her. And she didn't have to deal with it other than me keeping her informed, obviously, of this is kind of what's going on, this is what I'm doing, and being
Yeah.
sure she's in agreement with that. But you can't ignore it because the good employees, the most talented employees are the ones who are also the most marketable. And if they think you're not going to handle a toxic environment, they're going to go find someplace else to work. So they're really looking to you for that leadership and that guidance.
Yeah.
So the best thing to do is to, again, listen to all sides, find out what's really going on. If you need to sit two people in a room together, once that's done, so that you can air those differences and get agreements that they don't have to like each other, but they're going to be professional, and they're not going to be gossiping and, things like that, then great. They can go out and they can still be coworkers. They're just not going to be friends, and that's fine. You don't
Yeah.
have to be friends with everybody you work with,
Well,
but you
and
have to address it.
in a smaller company, right? I think so many of our audience will not probably have any HR people yet, or they don't
Right.
really quite know yet when is the right time. Do I get somebody fractional? Do I just get a platform? When it's time to hire a full-time person? And I know we're going to talk about that in a minute. But I think in general, it's that there's the two relationships, right? There could be something toxic in between the employee and the business owner, or something in the team, right? And we all want
Right.
to think that we have a great culture and we all want to think that we have set the standards and that we are defending and guarding our culture. But so often, sometimes it's just personalities that don't get along. Or
Sure.
what we see all the time in our room is, we have business owners that just haven't been clear about what everybody's lane is, what everybody's responsibility is. So everybody steps all over each other and on each other's toes. Then you have like, it's kind of like dogs peeing on a tree. It's like
Right. Sticking to
ter
territory.
territory wars going on. I mean, there's all sorts of
My
stuff.
tree.
Exactly, this is my tree. But the problem with that is like if you don't have an HR professional, an HR partner to help with that, you as the business owner are always the one who's sorting it out. And I don't know about you, Catherine, you work with a lot of people too. I've rarely met an entrepreneur who enjoys dealing with conflict. I
They
don't know. That,
don't.
that seems like those two personalities don't really go together. So it's something
Well,
that's
and
constantly
HR,
avoided,
yeah, and HR can protect them from that,
right?
so that they can focus on growing their business and doing what they love to do and they're good at, or they're learning to do and to be even better at, and let somebody else handle all the people issues. And again, if you can develop with a fractional HR person that relationship, that trusted relationship with them, they're going to keep you posted on the important stuff, but the minutia you're not even going to have to know about. You're not going to have to deal with it all, so that you can just focus on your lane as well. And
Yeah,
then that person can also be working with all the other people, all the other employees, all the other managers to make sure that lanes are clear and everybody respects each other and each other's position.
yeah. And I think just not having the drama in your workplace, right? That would probably just be incredibly attractive to most of our clients. Because I know that, the drama is what
Yeah.
a lot of
You
times
know,
makes working together impossible.
well, and oftentimes in small employers as well, they give somebody the responsibility of HR who will have a variety of other responsibilities as well. That person, without having the training, you're really setting them up to fail, but you're
Mm,
also setting yourself up to fail because they can walk you into situations where you're going to get sued for not doing things. You're going to get an audit by the Department of Labor or EEOC. They've done their best, but they don't know what they don't know.
yeah,
And like I said, that's not fair to them or to you, and in your business that you work so hard to build. So
yeah,
I think that's really important that they have the help they need if you're going to give that responsibility to somebody. So they've got someone they can reach out to, they can call, and someone who's actually overlooking the HR function. But it's also important that the HR person isn't perceived as being like a friend to certain people and maybe talking out of school and telling stories, giving up confidential information. Because, I mean, that's if an HR person ever reveals anything confidential, then they may as well get out of the business because they've just lost all credibility and they
right.
can't be a.
Well, what you're just saying, I think, is an issue for a lot of business owners because, like what we just talked about, so often I find that the HR person is probably the front office manager. Like that's most often who also
Right.
gets to have the HR position.
Exactly.
And that is kind of for a lot of businesses, that front office person is kind of the office mom or office parent, right? It's kind of like that person
Yeah.
who knows
Right.
everybody, who takes care of everybody, who, is the Jack or Jackie of all trades, who kind of gets it all together. And when there is some sort of contentious situation, that makes it really difficult because now that person has
It
to kind of
does.
can't be Switzerland, and that's what we really need. So, yeah. Huh.
Yeah.
So, what would you
Absolutely.
what would you say, for so many of our listeners who, are in a place where they have, well, I don't know, like 5 to 10 employees maybe, and they're growing steadily, they're hiring steadily, and at some point they're like, oh, this is a lot of stuff to deal with. Like, when is it really the best time to start thinking about it, and like, how do you go about it as a growing small business?
Okay. And And I do think once you start getting closer to that 10 level, 8 to 10 people, that's just a lot of movement, a lot of people moving
Hmm.
around. And you're right, you're going to be hiring, you're going to be training, there's going to be problems as you start to grow. And if you want to be scalable, obviously you got to put in all the right processes. So I do think you should hire out. I don't think you at that point would ever need a full-time HR. I would say what by the time you get to 50 and above, you really should have somebody there who is trained, who's going to be boots on the ground all the time. Up until that point, you can use a fractional HR service. There's lots of big box, type places out there, ADP and Paychecks and, some of those. There's a difference to me though when Bamboo HR is another one. You don't get a lot of personalized service. You get a lot
Right.
of templates and, standard processes and things like that. And they may run your payroll for you and may run your HR onboarding, just the hiring piece of it, not the paperwork piece, not the other part. So you just have to be careful, and some can be very expensive. So you really want to do your research and, find people who've worked with those different companies and know what you're signing up for.
Hmm.
That's not my approach. My approach is very customized, and I specialize in the small business owners as well. And I don't want to give somebody more than what they absolutely need, but I'm going to give them everything that they need, even if they don't know they need it yet. So I will make sure that they're taken care of and they're covered and they can build their business and they've got standard policies that we can create for them, their employee handbook and all of the onboarding, getting all the like the I-9 paperwork, and you kind of talked about some paperwork errors. The I-9 alone, there's like 62 places you could make a mistake on an I-9.
Wow.
That's a lot. And you can get fined for if today is May 22nd. If you put in 5/22/25, that's an error. It's got to be 05/22/2025.
Oh my
I mean, that's a
God.
fine.
That's
It's
crazy.
ridiculous. Yeah. So there's again, you got to know how to sign documents. You got to make sure that you've done. I mean, they're really complicated now because there's a lot of permanent residents and things like that. So there's 13 digit codes that you got to put into a system. You got to do e-verify to make sure they're legal, and you've got a certain amount. You can do it if they started today or tomorrow, but you can't do it on day three. Otherwise, you're out of compliance.
Wow.
I mean, there's a lot to it.
Yeah, I
So
remember you did a presentation for us. I think it must have been about the I-9 at some point where you said like you could make
yeah,
30 mistakes on the one little form or something like that.
right.
I don't, and it
Yeah,
can
it's just
cost
crazy.
crazy amounts of money. I mean, that's nuts. Just missing a digit on a date that could be something
Right.
incredible. Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, what I know that there's a platform that you like that you've talked about that's like very small businesses use. Tell us a little bit about
It
that.
is. Yeah, so it's interesting. The company is called GoCo, Goco. Absolutely love them. I've been using them now for almost 5 years, and I've got quite a few clients that use it. Makes the whole HR piece a lot easier because
Hmm.
all your documents get signed inside the system. Your offer letters are, you can standardize them, customize them, goes through the system. The employee uploads all their information. They were just recently purchased by Intuit.
Oh,
So that's going to give them even more like the ability to interface with if you've got QuickBooks for your payroll, et cetera.
right.
So because they also have a payroll, they use Gusto as their payroll processor. So you can do the whole thing through them. It makes life a lot easier and it's fully 100% compliant. So I definitely highly recommend them. And if any of your listeners ever decide they want to do it, contact me because I usually can get you a much better price. I always say, because I'll be on a call with them, and I always say, don't accept their first offer because I guarantee you I can cut those costs for you. Simply
Oh,
because I've got enough clients there. So it's like, don't accept their offer. Let's talk. I'll go back to them and I will get you a better deal.
wow. Well, that
So
alone is worth
yeah.
making sure
Hmm.
to talk to you, right? So, kind of map out for
Yeah.
us. It's like, okay, so let's say our small businesses, they start with GoCo. So they like until what earlier you said 10 employees maybe, then get a fractional, and then at 50 get a full time. Is that kind of how you map it out?
Yeah, well, because HR now, so the GoCo is just a platform. Somebody still
Mm,
has to manage all that and get all those people in. And we've got people that are CDL drivers and they've got to be randomly drug tested, by DOT regulations, and some that are not. So they have to be in a different random pool, and all of that stuff can be run through GoCo.
Oh,
All
that's
of that can be managed, all that. But that doesn't take care of the HR component of hiring your people and, doing the onboarding other than the paperwork piece of it. The meetings with employees, the investigations. It doesn't take care of all the other HR stuff, but it makes your life a whole lot easier because everything's in one system,
mm-hmm.
and GoCo will coordinate with whatever payroll system that you have as well. So you don't have to do payroll through them. You can keep using your own payroll.
Yeah.
And I've got some clients who do the payroll too, and some who say, no, I'll keep my other payroll provider,
Yeah.
which is fine, whatever they
Okay.
want to do.
Well, that makes sense. Of
Yeah.
course. Okay. And then I think the other part that a lot of people are wondering around is like, okay, so now we have, the paperwork side of HR, but a much bigger function of HR that a lot of people really wish they didn't have to do or have anything to do with is hiring, right? So that whole big. So
Yes.
tell us a little bit about what a good HR professional does in terms of making sure that you get the right people on the bus, that like how do you run that hiring
Mhm.
process? I think that's what our listeners really want to hear about. So let us tell
Okay.
us what you think.
Yeah. So again, one of the things that you teach in your coaching program as well is before you go hire somebody, figure out what it is you want the outcomes to be.
Yeah.
What is this person expected to do for you? And then we write a job description around that. And then from that, we do a job posting, which is really bringing in your vision, for the company so that you can get the right people who just say, oh my gosh, yes, that's the company I want to work for. And then they apply. And then you put them through the whole interview process. We go through screening. I'll post, like today, I'm going to post another position for, it happens to be a CDL driver. I guarantee you, probably within the first 2 hours, I'll probably have about 60 applicants.
Wow.
So yeah, so it's a lot to go through each of those and just kind of look at them, look for the experience level that you're looking for, um, and then X out somebody you aren't interested in, and then you set up some telephone screens. We always do telephone screens first. It takes about 15, 20 minutes. Tells them a little bit about the job and the company and ask some pretty basic questions, about their expectations and their experience. And then we'll narrow that list down to maybe 5 candidates that we're actually going to talk to and put them through the interview process. And I use a team approach. So it put together depends on the position. I put together templates that are based upon the competencies that are critical for that position, like attention to detail, things like that. Being able to be a strong leader and deliver bad news if you need to, if for certain positions. So look at that, and then from those we'll have the team interviews, and people will be rating them as they're talking as to from a score from 1 to 5, 5 being they walk on water almost, and one is "Ugh, horrible answer."
No way, no how. Yeah.
You know, yeah. How do you rate each person on each question so that you can kind of compare apples to apples, and then we meet as the team afterwards. It's usually right after
Hmm.
we'll jump back on the call and say, okay, so what are your thoughts? And some may say, gosh, I gave him 60 points. And I'm like, ooh, okay, I gave him 45. So let's talk about where we're different
Hmm.
because you may have seen something I didn't see or vice versa.
And how many
You know,
people would you say is like the right number for that team approach to have in the interview?
well, you will usually have two other people plus me or one of my other people on my team that are
Okay.
recruiting
Yeah, you don't want
for the
too many
position. But
opinions.
I like to get some, you don't, but you also don't want to overwhelm the candidate either. Because whether
Right.
they're doing it virtually and they're on a Teams call or a Zoom call, it's kind of intimidating if you have a whole bunch of boxes that they're looking at,
Right.
because they're already nervous and you really want them to calm down. And when we do the interview, I do it kind of like we're having our conversation today. It's a conversation, and I kind of have everybody introduce themselves, talk a little bit about where they've been in their career and why they applied for the position. Like what inspired you, to apply for this position when you saw the ad, kind of see where they're coming from, and then go through a series of questions. And I always tell them, look, I don't want theory. I don't want to know what you would do in this situation. I want to know what you did,
Mm. Mhm.
so I'll say, tell me about a time when, and have them give us an explanation. And so, at that point, we all agree on who our candidate is, and then we start the offer process,
Hmm.
to,
And like with those questions, right? Let me just check on that because I know
yeah,
that a lot of people ask about that, right? Do you have a set like a standard list of questions that you use? Do you change it around depending on, the position, the company, the
I have a bank of questions, although I have to admit that AI has been a humongous help,
yeah,
because I can ask for questions related to a specific type of company who in this kind of an industry for this position, this size, and here's some of the major responsibilities. Give me some behavior and motivational questions. So I don't want to know what motivates them. I don't want to say, well, so how do you keep yourself motivated? What are they going to tell you?
right,
And would you even care what their answer was?
right,
But you want to know, are they excited to do this kind of work? Are they dedicated to it? Are they passionate about it? Are they good at it? Again, so some of the training that you've, taught, through your coaching program, you
yeah,
really want to know, is this person going to be it for you?
yeah,
So we go through that. But yeah, so I've created some really cool templates. But what I do is, so now let's stick with drivers. If I'm going to do a driver, then I'm going to ask everybody those same questions.
mm,
Because if you don't, number one, you're setting yourself up for discrimination. That, well, the only reason they didn't hire me is because, and figure out which box you want to check on that. But if you ask them all the same questions, and if you have another ancillary question that comes up in one of them, fine, ask the other people the same question. Just write it down and make sure you ask, and keep your good notes. I also
yeah,
teach the interviewers how to interview and what not to say. Like, you can't ask
mm,
about certain things. Doesn't matter if they have children, doesn't matter if they have a car, doesn't matter if they own a home. You certainly don't ask their birth date. You know, um, so making sure that all of that is very clear with the interviewer, so you train them in advance so they don't get you
mm,
tripped up. I also know that if you record, because sometimes I'll record the interviews because maybe another manager wants to be able to review them, later, who didn't participate in the initial process. You have to keep them according to ADA and ADEA. You have to keep those recordings for 3 years
oh my
because that's the
gosh,
statute of limitations. Yeah. And Teams automatically deletes after 119 days. So you can either go change that, that time limit, or you can download them, but you have to save them. So you
because
may not want
what
to,
I'm just curious,
well,
what would somebody need a recording for?
if somebody, oh, so like say a manager wants to be able to look at the recording later to decide, do I agree with your decision to hire this person or not? And
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't participate. So like maybe they'd given it to another supervisor for that role. The reason that a candidate who didn't get the job might want that recording is to prove that you discriminated against them.
Uh,
And that's the only reason they didn't get hired. And there's a 3-year statute of limitations.
yeah, that's
So
fascinating.
be really careful. We've just recently decided with one of my clients that for the hourly positions, we're not going to record. You also have to ask permission with them, like turn on your recording and then say, do I have your permission to record this interview? If they say no, you cannot record. But if they do say yes, then you can continue the recording. But
Wow.
in some states, like I happen to live in Texas, if one person agrees, which would be me in this case,
Right.
then I can record you. But in some states, you all have to agree. So to just be clear, one of the ladies on our team she got her law degree from Purdue, and she just said, don't, you've got to have it. You have to have their permission. So ask their permission. They can't nod their head. They have to verbally say yes.
Got it.
And
Yeah,
that's the
those are
only way
all
you can
these
record.
teeny tiny nuances, right? Where you'd never I would never know about it. I'd be like, yeah, she
Yeah,
nodded her head, that's all good. But if you didn't say
right.
yes, apparently now I violated things. Ugh. That is
Well,
really, really trippy.
one of the things that I deal with a lot with small business owners, because again, they can't even imagine that any of this could ever happen to
Right.
them. Like, they're not going to get sued. Come on. Well, if you think about it, who's the government going to go after? They know that large corporations have full staffed HR professionals, generally attorneys, either on call or on staff.
Mm-hmm.
They're not likely to make mistakes. So, or at least they're not likely to make stupid mistakes. it's the smaller business owners who are going to make mistakes because they don't know any different.
Mm,
So if a disgruntled person, employee or not, or current or past, goes to the EEOC, they could file a complaint. It costs them nothing. They do the attorney involved. The EEOC will send you an application that have a charge. They'll set up for if you want to do mediation or not, which I always recommend do mediation because it's cheaper and hopefully you
mm,
can solve it without a long drawn out 2, 3 years in depositions. But then what they'll do is they will give them their right to sue letter. And at that point, they can take all the documents that you've shared with the EEOC or the Department of Labor to an attorney and deposit them at, very low cost because now that attorney doesn't have to do their own investigation. They get to just read all the transcripts and all the supporting documents. So, and then you have yourself a real problem. But yeah, anybody can go and just say I was discriminated against. It's the only reason I didn't get the job is I'm, like I said, check off which box do you want to check? I'm
wow.
40 or over. I'm a certain race. I'm whatever.
Wow. This is
So
putting the fear in all of us, Catherine.
I
This is
know.
probably not what
Well,
most people think about. Because I would think like
I'm
who's going to
sorry.
go after a tiny business, right? They're going to go against after the big guys, but you're right. They probably have attorneys on staff and
Uh,
they're a lot
yeah,
less
and they're going to have
vulnerable.
trained professionals. Yeah, they're not going to make the same mistakes.
Yeah.
And when I think of small business owners and how hard, and I'm a small business owner, you think how hard you work
Yeah.
in order to create a business and to have it all just taken away by some disgruntled person is just mind-boggling, horrifying.
Horrific. Yeah, it's horrific.
So when I can make sure I'm in the front of it, one of the things that happens a lot, and I just have two recent ones, is where I get brought in as the fixer.
Oh, yeah, that's what we were talking about
It's
earlier.
a, yeah, it's a whole lot harder to fix something because by now you've got upset employee or ex-employee, and you're trying to especially when you find out that way they did do some things wrong.
Hmm.
Now you're trying to fix that too and get them from, having any more damage done than what's going to happen anyway. So it's a lot easier to bring in an HR professional so that you just prevent that stuff from ever happening. You have that person you can call and just say, okay, I'm about ready to fire this person. It's like, okay, let's take a breath and let's talk through this. What happened? And then it's like, okay, let's do this instead.
Yeah.
Let's do a written warning. What kind of documentation do you have? So that if you don't have any documentation, then it never happened. You never talked to this person before ever about anything that they were doing wrong because you have no proof. So let's document, let's start from here, and let's move forward. And
Yeah.
we'll do the progressive discipline, unless it's something egregious, in which case you don't pass go, you just you just make your decision.
Wow.
But it's a whole lot easier to be in the prevention mode than to be in the cleanup mode afterwards
Yeah,
or damage
proactive is
control mode.
always a whole lot better than reactive, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's people like me. I'm certainly not the only HR person in the world who absolutely loves doing what I do, because there's a lot of dedicated HR people out there. But for us, when you come to me and say, okay, I've got this problem, I'm just like, awesome. Okay, let's talk because I can fix it. I can take care of this. No, let's not do that. Okay, here's how we can solve that to get you what you need, but we can also make it a positive, down the road, and we can be consistent.
Right.
Because again, let's just say you've got an employee that, my God, they're just the nicest person on the planet, and they're constantly late coming to work, and they miss a lot of time. So you don't really say anything because they're so nice anyway. And when they're here, they do a really amazing job. They got some critical skills you really need. But there's somebody else who maybe you don't like quite as much. You might not even know them as well, and they have the same record, maybe not even as bad, and you discipline them. That's a problem,
Mm.
because now
Oh,
you're not applying the
right.
rules consistently. So again, an HR person's going to have all those records and say, okay, so how have we handled other people in the past? What does the policy say? What
Right.
does it say in the handbook? Did you have them sign the handbook so they know what the rules are? So you can say, yes, they did know what the rules were. Here's their signature and here's the date they signed it.
Right.
So
Yeah.
again, it's that consistency that's so important. Consistency and fairness is going to get
Consistency,
you a long ways.
fairness, and the other thing, you've been saying over and over is like for your average business owner, this is like all the stuff they have no idea about. And why would they? Why should they,
Right.
right? So it's kind of like uh as a business owner, you try all to do all the different jobs and you're only really good at the one.
Yeah.
So, and nobody really, I mean, we love that you love HR and we love everybody who loves HR. To me, it sounds like nails on a chalkboard because so many rules, so many regulations. And I mean, like, I'm curious, Catherine, how do you handle this with your clients? Because, like you said, you're in Texas. Do you work with people all over the US? And because, I mean, the laws are
All
different.
over,
So you have
all
to
over
really
the
know,
US.
all the laws and all the different states then.
You
Wow.
do. Yeah, well, and it's like one of my clients has 5 locations in 5 different states. So when we did their employee handbook for them, we made sure that we took in kind of the strongest language, from one of the states.
Mm.
It happens to be California.
Mhm.
So it's like it's how you pay sick pay and how many days they're allowed to have and if it can be accrual and all those kind of things. We just did it for everybody. It's
Yeah.
like as long as you live up to that standard, you're going to be good in all the other states as well. But then, I have a training platform where, we did sexual harassment training. So there's some for California managers and California employees. There's different ones for New Jersey,
Wow.
different ones for New York. I mean, so different. And then there's some general ones that are good for every other state that doesn't have their own requirement,
Wow.
and so we had to take each person and put them in a track. It says, okay, so for you guys that work in Georgia, you're going to take this one. Those of you in California are going to take that one, etc. But then we can
So,
monitor it, make sure everybody takes the training so they know what not to do, and the company protects itself. And your insurance rates go down when you do that.
okay.
Because insurance companies for liability, they want to know you're making sure your employees know about safety and what to do, and they're also making sure you're not going to walk yourself into some problems. So
Yeah.
when you do the harassment training and you train your managers, your insurance premiums are lower,
Oh,
and
interesting.
yeah,
So,
so it's, I mean, it goes all the way around because their risk is lower.
yeah. Now that makes total sense. And I'm sure a lot of people don't know this. So, I mean, for all of you out there who have distributed teams, it's a really bad idea to just have your office manager deal with the HR because now we're not
Yeah,
just talking about one set of rules, we're talking about a multitude of sets of rules. So,
multitude
that definitely somebody who's not a trained professional who's constantly looking at how the law and the laws are changing all the time, right? So
all the time.
it's really not fair to expect for somebody to do this who's not a trained professional.
Yeah, even minimum wages, so some states, well, most states have different minimum wages, but within those states, in certain counties or cities, metropolitan areas, they have a higher minimum wage. So you have to be aware of that as you're setting salaries and wages that, oh, okay, well, I can't pay $15 an hour in San Francisco because their minimum is, I don't know, $16.83 or
Right, right.
whatever. So you have to know Chicago's got their own. So a regular person who's coming to work to do an office manager type role, they have no way of knowing or keeping up with all that information. It's just too much,
Wow. Wow. Yeah,
and
and
it'll get
that's
you in trouble.
uh,
And
um,
whether somebody should be salaried or hourly, they'll say,
right.
"Oh no, all my people are salaried." Yeah, let's look at their job duties because that's not up to you to decide. That's governed by the government. The
Wow.
feds tell you whether or not you have to pay them overtime. You can call them whatever you want to call them, but these people are going to get overtime, and these people you don't have to give overtime. So that's one of the first things I usually do when I get a new client is I go through and I look at all of their people, all how they've classified the FLSA, and then we talk about, okay, what duties are they actually performing, and let's get this fixed so that it's proper going forward.
Right. Yes, all these things that most of us mere mortals would have no idea about. So we're glad we have you. This is probably all we have time for today, but thank you so much. We talked about some really
You're very
important
welcome.
stuff. We talked about why HR is important. We talked about why HR has a bad rep and what to do about and what's actually true on the other hand. When do you actually need HR to come in? It's like the different phases of business. Do you need a fractional? What's the platform look like? Do you need to hire full time? And then all the little mistakes that you could make that could cost you a lot of heartbreak and a lot of money and a lot of stress. So I
Yeah.
think the takeaway that I'm having is most people should get help with their HR much, much sooner than they generally do, which is what we see in our clients
Mhm.
all the time.
Yeah,
And there's so many great solutions out there. So I know, Catherine, a lot of times I've heard you say all the time, it's like, just call me, have a conversation. I can even at least guide you in the right direction.
absolutely.
So if any of our listeners out there
Yeah,
feel like,
happy
oh,
to do that.
so how do they reach you? What's the best way to connect with you?
Yeah, so go to my website first of all. That's the best place. So it's www.quantumascendance.com. And you can also download my book for free
Great
so
book.
that you can, yeah, which will really tell you a lot about how to cover your assets so that you don't lose them. That was
Yeah,
the tagline of my book. Yeah, and it's HR for small business owners. So you'll get a lot of tips inside of there, what to do and what not to do. And then you can call me 903-245-2199, and I'll either pick up the phone or leave me a message, and I guarantee you I will call you back.
awesome.
And I'm happy
Well,
to help. Yeah.
and Catherine is always a hoot to talk to, no matter what, on top of that. And she has a lot of great information. So, any of you who are out there who are kind of in that place where you are wondering if you should get an HR professional and how to best go about that, call Catherine, contact her because she'll definitely be a very valuable resource for you. So, thank you so much for being here today. This was a
Thank you.
great conversation, and we'll see everybody next week.